We continue now at the top of Daf Memches Amid Beis in Meseches Gitin. This is Gittin Daf 48b. On the previous summit, there was a machlokas amoraim between Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. Is kinyan peiros kekinyan aguf dummy or not? Rabbi Yochanan held that kinyan peiros is kekinyan aguf. If you own the fruits of the land, it's as if you own the land itself. And according to Reish Lakish, kinyan peiros is lav kekinyan aguf. Owning the fruits of the land is not considered like owning the land itself. And at the bottom of the previous summit, the Gemara said that there's a pasuk and there's also a brisa that supports the position of Reish Lakish that kinyan peiros is lav kekinyan aguf. The pasuk says, "B'mispar shnei tevuos yimacher loch." It's talking about during the times of Yovel, you have to sell according to the number of years of the produce that will be produced. And so therefore you see that it's just a kinyan on the peiros and not the karka, as Rashi says, "B'mispar shnei tevuos v'shas hayovel mishtoi." We're talking during the years that the halachos of Yovel apply. K'dechsib b'mispar shanim acher hayovel. That's what it says in the pasuk. Alma in gufa karka mocher. You see that you're not selling the land during that time. Ela tevuos shel kol shana. You're selling the crop. You're selling the produce of each year. That's why it's talking about the number of years of produce. That's how you should calculate the price of the sale. And Masnisa, the brisa that supports Reish Lakish, the brisa says, the Tanya, as we learned in a brisa, bechor, when it comes to a bechor, the halach is a bechor gets a double portion, but only a double portion of the property that the father actually had at the time of his death. And so it says that a bechor notel pishnayim besada hachozeres lava biyovel. A bechor gets a double portion even by a field that will return to his father at the Yovel year, meaning even though the father did not have the property at the time of his death because he had sold the property, but since it's going to return to the father at the time of Yovel, it's as if the father has the property and the bechor gets a double portion of that field as well. Rashi says, "Bechor notel besada hachozeres lava biyovel kolomer." What it means is as follows: besada hachozeres la'achim. You're going to have a field that will return to the brothers, machmas shemochra avin, because the father just sold it and it goes back to the ancestral heritage at the time of Yovel. Di dechazer b'chaya pshita. If we're talking about what it already returned while the father was alive, that's too obvious. Obviously, we're not talking about that. We're saying it's going to return to the brothers at Yovel. The point of this brisa is to teach us that the karka itself is not actually owned by the purchaser. It's really as though the father owns the property even before he died, because that land will return. Really what it means is the land has always been the father's. It's just the produce that belongs to the lokeach. The kinyan aguf dami. Now, if you said that kinyan peiros is kinyan aguf, havalei roy, that would not be considered something that the father right now owned at the time of his death. That would actually be considered something that is going to return to the father. It's roy. It's fit to go to the father. Ve'ena bechor notel beroy. The bechor doesn't get a double portion by roy. Techsib bechol asher yimotzei lo b'muchzak b'yeru, has to be something in his possession, and so therefore it's clear from this brisa as well that kinyan peiros is lav kinyan aguf. The purchaser does not own the actual property. It's the father's property. And that's why the bechor is able to get a double portion in that property. And the Gemara continues, Amar Abaya says, Naktinan, we have a tradition, Baal b'nichsei ishto, when it comes to a husband in his wife's property. This is talking about nichsei melug, where the husband gets the peiros of the property, but the wife actually owns the property. Tzarech harsha, he needs a harsha, which means that the wife, if he wants to go to court and he wants to act as the litigant, as the interested party in the case in terms of that property, he needs a harsha from his wife, meaning his wife essentially has to give permission for him to act as the litigant in the case. He's not really the owner, she is the owner. Now that's only true if they're also not going to court regarding the produce. But if they're already going to court with regards to the produce, and certainly the husband is the interested party when it comes to the produce, so migo de mishtoi dina apiri, since the husband is involved in the case in terms of the produce, mishtoi dina gufa, so then he can also be considered the litigant in the case in terms of the gufa karka. But otherwise, what do we say? If the case does not concern the produce, then the husband is not considered the interested party. He's not the owner of the actual land. It is the wife that's the owner of the actual land. Rashi says, Tzarech harsha, he requires a harsha me'ishto, meaning from his wife. She has to write over a contract that he now is allowed to represent the case in court regarding this karka. In bolodunim shum adam begufa karka, if he wants to go to court with any person about this actual land, he needs a harsha from his wife. The leka harsha, if he doesn't get that harsha, the other person can tell the husband, lav bal devarim didiyat, you're not the opposing litigant in this case. The kinyan peiros lav kekinyan hagufu, because kinyan peiros is not kekinyan haguf. That's the point of this tradition that Abaya is is quoting is that kinyan peiros is not kinyan aguf. And again, the Gemara then qualified the lo nochis ladun lapir. That's only true if they're not also going to court about the produce. Shein lo ladun imo klum bepeiros. As long as the court case doesn't involve the fruits at all, so then we say he needs a harsha. Shein lo tayin imo so ish bepeiros klal, meaning there's no back and forth, there's no dispute regarding the peiros. But if there's a dispute regarding the peiros, certainly the husband is the interested party in the peiros. Then he can also be considered to be. Then he can also represent in terms of the issue that they're dealing with the guf hakarka, with the karka itself. Hadron aloch hasholeach. We will return to you parak hasholeach. This is the end of the 4th parak of Meseches Gitin. If you're enjoying these videos and this channel, please like, share, and subscribe. And please take a look at the description box below to see how you can support this channel. And we will now begin the 5th parak of Meseches Gitin. And the Mishnah says, Hanizakin shamin lehen be'idis. When it comes to damages, we evaluate using the best property, meaning the person has to pay for the damage using the best of his property if he's not paying with money. Ubalchov, and a person who's paying a debt, bebeinanis, he pays with the average property. Uchsubasisha, when you pay the ksubasisha, beziboris, you pay with the lowest property. Rabbi Meir says, Af ksubas isha bebeinanis, also ksubasisha, is paid with the average property. We don't collect from the chasim mishubadim, from property with a lien on it, meaning let's say the person who owed money sold his property to others, the property had a lien on it, so you don't go to those people who bought the property, in situations where you have available free property, meaning the person who owes the money has his own property, so you don't go to people who bought property from him, that's nechasim mishubadim, if you have a situation where you could collect from the chasim and echorin. Ziboris, even if they are ziboris, even if they're the worst quality of land, but if you have nechasim and echorin, that comes before nechasim mishubadim. We don't collect from the property of Yisomim, except for from the worst land. We don't take for the consumption of peiros and for the improvement of land. Rashi will explain those terms. And for sustenance for the wife and sustenance for the daughters, we don't take from the chasim mishubadim in all of these cases. Mipnei tikkun ha'olam, for the betterment of the world. V'hamotzi mitzia lo yishav mipnei tikkun ha'olam. If somebody finds a lost object, returns a lost object, he doesn't have to take an oath. That is also for the betterment of the world. Rashi explains, Hanizakin shaman lahen nizakin v'govin demei nizkan, meaning we evaluate how much damage was there, and we collect the value of that damage, be'idias, from the best property, shabenichse hamazik, meaning the best property among the property of the person who inflicted the damage, shenoach lo la'adam ligvos muat mikarka idias, because a person prefers to collect a little bit from good land, v'lo ligvos harve miziboris, rather than collecting a lot of bad quality land. Everything here in this Mishnah is for the betterment of the world, as the Gemara will explain. Again, it said you're not allowed to take, you're not allowed to collect for the consumption of fruits and for the improvement of land. You can't collect from the chasim mishubadim for these things. And Rashi explains, let's say a person steals a field and he sells it to someone else. And then he plants it and it makes fruits. Number one, he gets fruits out of the land. Uban nigzel, and so the person who was ultimately stolen from comes. V'gava im peirosem min halokech, so he collects it together with its fruits from the person who purchased it. Ve'enu meshalem l'lokeach, he doesn't have to pay the lokeach. Kim hayitzia, except for whatever the lokeach spent on it. That's all he has to pay the lokeach for. Now the lokeach wants to get back his money. He was sold the field by the thief. So chozra lokeach al hamocher. So the person who purchased it, he can go to the seller, meaning the thief. Now for the land, he can collect from the thief even from property with a lien. Again, that would mean even property that the thief, let's say, sold to others. He can even get that property. The nechasim mishubadim, he can collect in terms of the value of the property. Because this was sold with achrayas, meaning the person who sold it took responsibility, and there was a lien in this case, so he can collect from the nechasim mishubadim. The chasav lo shtar mechira, he wrote from this shtar mechira. So therefore, since there was a shtar, again, we assume that any purchasers were aware. V'harei milva b'shtar, that's essentially the same thing as a loan with a shtar. That's in terms of the property itself. Now, what about for the fruits? How can he get compensated for the fruits? And the fruits he can only collect from the chasim and echorin, from free property. V'lomim mishubadim, not from mishubadim. That's what our Mishnah is saying. The Gemara will explain the reason. Now, the same thing is true for any improvement that happened to the land. Let's say the purchaser, The buyer over here, again, the one who bought it from the thief, let's say improved the land. Benetiasi lono, so taiva bezevel, either he planted trees, he put manure. Bedaira, again, taiva and daira are ways of putting manure. Taiva is when you bring the zevel to the land. Daira is when you put animals inside the land, and that's how you fertilize the land. But in any case, he improved the land. So for the improvements of the land as well, when he goes to collect, he can't collect from the chasim mishubadim, he can only collect from the chasim b'nei chorin. If somebody finds a lost object and he returns the lost object, the Mishnah said he doesn't have to swear. The case over here is he returned the lost object. The owners say that he didn't return everything; he only returned part of it. In general, by Modav and Mixas, there's a shvua, so lo yishava. Over here, he doesn't have to take a shvua. That's for the betterment of the world. That's going on all the cases of the Mishnah. And the Gemara says, in a situation of damages, he pays from the best of his property. That's for the betterment of the world. Doraisi, that's a doraisa that's learned from the psukim. Techsiv, as it's written in the pasuk, Meitav Sadeo, Meitav Karmi Yishalem, it says he pays the best of his field and the best of his vineyard. So again, it's learned from a pasuk. Why does it say Mneitikun Ha'olam in the Mishnah? Amar Abaya says, Lo tzricha el Rabbi Yishmael. No, the Mishnah is necessary according to the position of Rabbi Yishmael. Because Rabbi Yishmael says on a doraisa level, when we talk about paying from the best property, we mean the best property of the one who was damaged. So the Mishnah is teaching us that for the betterment of the world, we don't evaluate based on the nizik's best property, rather we evaluate based on the mazik's best property. And the Gemara says, My Rabbi Yishmael, what is this position, what is this opinion of Rabbi Yishmael? The Tanya, as we learned in a Braisa, Meitav Sadeo, Meitav Karmi Yishalim, it says the best of his field and the best of his vineyard, that's what he pays. Meitav Sadeo shall nizik, Umeitav Karmo shall nizik, Divrei Rabbi Yishmael. It's the best of the field of the one who was damaged, and the best of the vineyard of the one who was damaged. That's the opinion of Rabbi Yishmael. Rabbi Akiva says, Lo bo hakasav elo ligvos l'nizaken min ha'idjis. The pasuk is coming to say that we collect by cases of damage from the best property. V'kal v'chomer lehektish, and that's certainly true when it comes to hektish. And the Gemara now analyzes Rabbi Yishmael's opinion. Well, Rabbi Yishmael, now what's Rabbi Yishmael saying over here? Rabbi Yishmael is saying we evaluate based on the best field of the nizik. What does he mean? Achal shmeina mishalim shmeina, achal kechusha mishalim shmeina. Does he mean that, let's say, the damage was done to the best of the property, then you have to pay from the best of the property, and if it was done to the worst of the property, then you still have to pay from the best of the property? Meaning to say, right now the Gemara thinks that we consider it as if the best property was damaged, even though it's the worst property that was damaged. Does that make sense? Amar Ravidi Baravin says, and here's the case that we're dealing with according to Rabbi Yishmael. Let's say someone's animal went to someone else's property and it ate from a patch of field among the different patches of the field. And we don't know what it ate from. Did it eat from some of the weaker land? Did it eat from some of the fatter land, from some of the better land? So in that case, the Meshalem Leimi Meitav. So there Rabbi Yishmael is saying you have to assume that it was from the best of the field. He has to pay him, assuming that it was from the best. But the Gemara still questions this. Amar Rava says, if we knew that it ate from the worst part of the land, Meshalim Chusha, he certainly would only have to pay according to the value of the worst land, according to the value of the damage. Hashta de lo yadinan Meshalim Shmeina, now that we don't know which land it is, he's got to pay according to the value as if it was the best land. Hamotzi mechaver olav haraya. What happened to the principle that if you're trying to take money from someone, the evidence is upon the person who's trying to collect the money. He should have to bring evidence that that was the value of the damage. He shouldn't have to pay the higher amount automatically. Elamar Ravacha Bar Yaakov, rather Ravacha Bar Yaakov says, what does Rabbi Yishmael mean? And Rashi explains, Bidinizak Shaimin, and again, the Mishnah is following Rabbi Yishmael's opinion that on a doraisa level, we evaluate based on the nizik, meaning, Midoraisa Shemaisa Ziboria Shalmazik Idish Shal Nizik. What it means is like this. Let's say on a doraisa level, if the worst property of the mazik, of the damager, is the same quality as the best property of the one who was damaged, Eino Magbeo Elam Zibori Shalo, he only collects, he only has to pay from his worst property, because his worst property is the same as the nizik's best property. That's like a leniency, really. On a doraisa level, that's a big leniency when it comes to the mazik. Kamash Malon Midrabanan. So the Mishnah is teaching us that on a Drabanan level, for the betterment of the world, Shinizar Milahazik, that we want people to be careful and not damage others, that we have to evaluate from the best property of the mazik, and you can't take this leniency and say, well, the worst property of the mazik is the equivalent of the best property of the nizik. Meitav sadeo, again, that's the words from the pasuk shel nizik. That means the best of the field of the nizik. That's on the doraisa level. And Rashi clarifies why the Gemara now asks a bunch of questions in terms of understanding Rabbi Yishmael. Hashta mashma. Right now, the Gemara thinks it means shem shilach beiro v'achla aruga shel beisav v'sad chaver, that if a person's animal goes out and damages a patch of field among a larger field of his friend, shamin aruga yavesh v'chol sad hanizik. You have to imagine as though it was the best quality patch of field among all of the fields of the nizik. V'nosein lo damen. You have to pay according to the value of the best quality, as if it were the same amount of land of the best quality. Even though the land that was damaged was much lesser value property, and the amount of damage was much less. Well, the kaman parach, and that's why the Gemara is going to ask later on, the animal eats from the worst property, and you have to pay as if it was the best property. Lo ba'akasav. Then Rabbi Akiva said the pasuk is coming to say to collect by nizakin from idiots, meaning lo ba'akasav lahachmir olav l'shalem yoser mishehizik. The pasuk is not coming to be strict on him and making him pay more than what he damaged. Ela ligvos lenizakin shir demei nizko kemos shehu. Rather, it's to collect the amount of whatever the damage was, whatever monetary value the damage was, min ha'idiyos, from the best property. She'im ein lo mos v'rotza lefroa lo karka. Meaning, if the person doesn't have money, he wants to pay in land, b'shuma evaluating what the land is worth, tzarach litin lo mikarka mu'ula shalo. He has to give from his best property. That's what it means according to Rabbi Akiva. V'kal v'chomer lehektish. Then Rabbi Akiva added a line, and that's certainly true by hektish. L'kamon mefarish. That's going to be explained later on. Achal kechusha meshalem shmeina bitmia. Then the Gemara asks on Rabbi Yishmael, what do you mean he eats from the worst land and you pay from the best? Again, Bitzmiya, the Gemara is asking that as a question. Aruga ben arugos vayo ben kechusho so shmeinos mu'ravo zu etzel zu. So then the Gemara said the case is that he ate them. There's among the field a lot of different patches of field. There are good ones, there are good quality ones and lesser quality ones. V'lo yadin aneza, we don't know which one was eaten. The Gemara says you can't say that's the case either, because hamotzi mechaver olav araya. The rule is that if somebody's trying to collect from someone else, he needs to bring evidence. All of lavi edim lavaris hasafik. It's upon him to bring witnesses to clarify the doubt. So you can't just collect as if it was a higher amount of damage without proving that. That's learned out midoraisa. The concept of hamotzi mechaver olav araya is learned out from the psukim, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Mem Tes Amud Aleph.